questions or comments, I will be your voice. So just type it in the chat box of GoToMeeting, and I will flash on the screen, and when it's convenient for Tamara, she can refer to me and I will ask the question for you.
Thank you, Alana. Okay, so hopefully everyone has seen the message in the chat box that I'm going to be using Nearpod to share my slides today. Alana, do you mind throwing the code in there again? So you just go to the website on your smartphone or on your laptop, and then you enter the little letter code, and then you should be able to see the first slide of my talk on the screen. Alana already mentioned that we're using the chat box to make comments or ask questions, and we are hoping that people will engage and participate in the talk today, but just because of the captioning and the logistics with that, we just want Alana to be the speaker for everyone. I think we've just talked a little bit about Microsoft Translator app. You're welcome to hop on and check it out. We've recommended it to be used with some students, so it's a cool tool for kids who are hard of hearing, and we've been using it a lot this year in our meetings to give access to teachers who need the visuals with the webcam. Another thing to bring up is that Joe and Pam's portion of the webinar will be recorded. So if you participate in the chat box and you don't wish to be immortalized on the recording, just make a note that you want your contribution to be anonymous, and Alana will pipe up with your name. So I think, oh, sorry, I just got distracted because it says, why are country music in the Microsoft app thing? I'm gonna try not to look at that. Sometimes there's some errors on the captioning that are quite amazing. So is everybody, maybe I only see 9 people in Nearpod, so maybe I will give everyone a minute just to finish figuring that out and logging in. If you have any problems, maybe look in the chat box. The code for the Nearpod thing is in there. So you just go to www.nearpod.com, and then the code is in the chat box, which is O as in Oscar, J as in juice, K as in kangaroo, U as in under, and H as in haha. Okay, good, I see 10, but we have 14 participants. So I'll give you one more minute. I have a bunch of polls and I need to collect some information, so it's important that everybody uses the Nearpod thing. Oh good, we've got lots of people. All right. I'm going to advance the slides here a little bit. So I would like to thank our special guest today. We have Jo Savo, who doesn't really need an introduction with this group. She's coming out of retirement to give a special talk today. And then we have Pam Waterhouse, who's a speech language pathologist for the Abbotsford School District. I met Pam in person when I was in our professional association when it was still called BCASLPO, and it's now called Speech and Hearing BC. Pam is a tireless advocate for students and services in schools, and she comes with a wealth of experience working as a collaborative team member in the schools. So that's why we invited her to talk with Jo today. So as you know, this is a 2-part session. So today we'll be talking about best practices in assessment and get some practical tips from Jo and Pam. And then next week, on May 3rd, we'll talk a little bit about some specific tools that you guys are interested in learning more about. Here's just a quick agenda of what we're going to cover today. Most of the presentation today will be Jo and Pam, but we'll just give a little bit of background and some information about assessment in general. So this is a kind of a funny topic for me to talk about. I cut my teeth in deaf ed at BC Family Hearing, and there all of our offices are shared. So every office at the time had a speech pathologist and TDHH partnered in the office. And I really appreciated that complementary skill set because I found, and at the time, the team, we had a lot of conversations about how we have sort of different approaches in our practice. So speech pathologists tend to focus on current environments and maybe next steps. And the teachers always seem to have a long range vision of the kids participating in school and being an adult and working. So having those different approaches and those different lenses were really valuable for my practice and for the kids. And talking about assessment in this context is tricky for me because I see why SLP should be assessing, and I also see why teachers of the deaf should be assessing. And in my particular role, I tend to hear about all the barriers and failed attempts or frustrations out there. You know, even in the last few weeks, just things about like SLP is not sharing materials, teachers of the deaf maybe choosing materials inappropriately and using English assessments for kids who sign. Assessments being done by a speech pathologist while the FM is in use, but in the classroom next door. So the kids listening to the teacher while trying to do an assessment. And we've had a ton of these questions pop up recently just about the roles and responsibilities of teachers of the deaf and SLPs. So that's why we started this webinar, and we're hoping that it's going to lead to a larger initiative. So there seems to be a lot of inconsistency among districts for various reasons. So things like staffing, there's vacant positions. Directors aren't supportive of having both disciplines involved for the same student. So a lot of districts, if you have a teacher of the deaf, you're not eligible for SLP services. Training differences, so there's a lot of variety in the background training that teachers of the deaf have when they come into the job. Some of you are level B certified, others are not. And then just personal experiences and professional preferences. So not all of you feel comfortable doing those assessments, or you only feel comfortable doing certain assessments, which is normal, and SLPs have our preferences too. So I contacted my SLP college. So because speech pathologists are health professionals, we have a licensing college in the same way that physicians do. So I contacted them to get some clarity on the issue. And this teacher of the deaf SLP issue in the school is on their radar. And they're drafting an interprofessional collaborative practice document that sort of outlines roles and responsibilities. We haven't really been given a timeline on that. So I've been in discussion with them about including major stakeholders from CADA, and we're hoping that between CADA and POP, we can facilitate some conversations with teacher of the deaf stakeholders so that it becomes a useful document for everyone and not either like so vague that it's not helpful or so prescriptive that people feel like it's not supportive of their practice or their collaboration. So we're hoping that this particular two-part series is just the beginning of some more in-depth and meaningful conversation about practices in different regions and practical solutions to the barriers that you guys are encountering in your districts. So if you're interested in this topic and you want to contribute to a collaborative practice document, just email Alana and I, because we're sort of representing POP and CADA in this initial initiative to try and sort some of this out so that there's more clear guidelines around the roles and responsibilities. So we'll hop into where do we start when we assess the students? So we know that kids who are deaf and hard of hearing have vulnerable language, and that can translate into challenges with literacy and later difficulties with academic achievement or social skills. By monitoring and assessing their language and listening skills regularly, we can identify strengths and areas of need before the challenges present themselves in other domains. So, for example, like academic performance, we can sort of predict where they're going to go before they get into school based on their language skills. And we can try and target those gaps and build them up so that it doesn't negatively impact their academic performance. We also assess to make sure that the progress being made over time is sufficient, and the data should inform how supports are being implemented and whether or not the current placement is working for the student. I'm just going to check on the chat box because I saw something pop up. Alana, there's no questions out there? Okay.
No questions. Just as people jump in, I'll just send out the captioning code and the presentation slides. So that will be the only thing.
Okay, perfect. So begin your assessments by asking good questions. So all students make progress over time, and the goal with intervention is to close any gaps by creating an environment where the student makes more progress than they would under normal circumstances naturally. So we also have to choose the tools that will capture progress being made. So a child that's, say, pre-verbal or interacts minimally with the environment, if we just keep doing the self with them, it'll just keep telling us that that kid is in the second percentile. So if you take 100 kids, there's 98 of them are going to have better communication than they do, and that's not really going to inform our practice all that much. So for a kid like that, we might want to choose a tool that has smaller steps so that we can capture the progress being made and identify next steps. We need to use the evidence from our assessment to make informed decisions about our interventions and classroom activities. It can help us guide discussions with the family around communication modalities used, around switching up equipment being used, making referrals, so to Sunny Hill or Deaf Wellbeing Program or POP. And I think the other thing that we need to keep in mind when we're asking our assessment questions is who are the best people to be collecting that information. So do we need to reach out to a colleague on our special ed team to help with the assessment and do some of the work jointly? So I've got a poll here, and you can answer on your question, or the question on your phone. So in order to qualify for Category F student, the student must have a level B assessment on file. So I'd like you to answer whether or not you think this is true or false on your phone. I'm going to give you one more second. There's only a few people that have answered.
She said on the phone, so that's what makes me think I needed to be on the phone.
Waiting for one more person, and then I'll share the results. This is encouraging. Okay, so you should be able to see the results. Can you see them, Alana?
Yeah.
So most of you said false. You don't need to have a level B in order to qualify for Category F. So that's the correct answer. You don't need to have a level B on file. That's great, because there's some folklore out there that you do need a level B on file. And so I just wanted to sort of demystify that a little bit and talk about the ministry requirements for assessment. So when we're talking about asking questions before we begin our assessment, for the few of you who answered yes, that you do need a level B assessment, I do hear about people scrambling and like throwing random assessments in the file just because you're being audited. So that's not a great reason to be doing an assessment. Could be a good catalyst to write up that report you've been procrastinating on, but it shouldn't be the reason or the guiding question that makes you do the assessment. So Bowen asked a really good question a few years ago at the itinerant conference. He asked Ann Dumas, who was a speaker who's an auditor from the Ministry of Education, and she presented at the itinerant conference. So Bowen asked, do we need to have level B assessments in the files? You can kind of read the yellow parts that I've highlighted. So Bowen, I think you're logged in today, and you get a gold star for asking that question, because I've actually used this transcript from the presentation a couple of times. So in case you missed it, no, you don't need level B assessments in the file. And a summary of what you do need is you just need any documentation that evaluates the student's specific goals. So in the transcript, she specifically mentions like auditory, like management of auditory devices, I think. And she says, you know, there's no standardized assessment that you can use to assess that. So hopefully that would be mentioned in the progress report. And if not, then they would look in the report card. So you've got a couple of opportunities to bring up the specific goals and how the school is supporting it, and then what the outcome has been in that term or that school year. But I was really happy to see that most of you did not, you don't think that you need a level B assessment on the file, so that's great. I guess you guys are self-selecting as being assessment gurus by participating in this webinar. So we'll talk quickly about types of tests. So we have, so if we use a gardening analogy, formative assessments are like feeding and watering plants appropriately to meet their needs. So, and if we notice that they're not growing properly, then you might change the window they're in, water them less, water them more, change the amount of water that you're giving them, versus a summative assessment, which is just waiting until the end of the summer and measuring them. So a summative assessment is interesting and important, but it has no bearing on growth. And I used to work for the First Nation Education Steering Committee, and one of the special ed teachers there was saying that if we do standardized assessment only once a year on students, it's like doing an autopsy on them. It doesn't really help them through the year, and it's just a snapshot of them in that one time. So we want to be doing good, formative assessments through the year, and then summarizing that in comprehensive reports a couple of times a year. Which brings me to my next point, which is that standardized tests tend to be diagnostic. And the results compare the outcomes to a group of kids that have taken the test that are the same age and have taken the exact same test in the exact same way. And then there's non-standardized tests, which tend to be more useful and helpful in an educational setting because you can give the test over and over. The steps in the test tend to be more appropriate to the kind of progress that the student is making. And it tends to track an individual's progress over time so that we can check in and see how the student is doing and see what supports need to be added or changed over time. So I'm going to talk really quickly about the levels of assessment. So anyone can give a level A assessment. There's no special qualifications. Those tend to be inventories, benchmarks, checklists, those kinds of things. Level B assessment, you generally tend to need to have a master's degree and then some special training. So most language tests need to have our level B, and you need to have a strong understanding of the psychometric principles and an in-depth knowledge of the skills or traits that are being measured. So the biggest part of the responsibility for level B assessment is identifying the limitations of background knowledge and making appropriate referrals to team members. So for language assessment, an occupational therapist can technically give a language assessment because they're level B certified, but they would know that they don't have the background knowledge to score the assessment and interpret the results meaningfully, so they would obviously refer to a speech pathologist. Level C tends to be doctoral level training. Those are like psychology tests or tests that give like lifelong diagnostic labels to kids. So just for Alana and I, and also for the group, we were curious to know if you're level B certified and what your comfort level is with level B assessments. So if you can answer the question on the screen, I'll give you a second. See, I think most of you are waiting for 1, 2, 3. Give me one more second.
Fill up my coffee. Are we going to be
one more? Share the results. So most of you say you're certified. Half of you say you're certified and you administer the level B assessments confidently. About a quarter of you or a third of you say you're certified, but you don't feel super comfortable administering, and then about less than a quarter of you aren't level B certified. So that's good information for us to have. All right, we'll zip through this next part so I can pass it over to Pam and Joe. So I want you to think about these questions that are on the screen. If we have the same kid, but 3 different scenarios, you're gonna pick different tools, hopefully. So say you have a child that's in grade 2, they've been on your caseload since kindergarten, and they need an updated assessment. It's May. So if you just need to do the updated assessment for your own planning and your own therapy, you might collect a language sample, maybe do a functional auditory measure, update your social communication checklist, and you could probably just do all that yourself. If the child's been referred to Sunny Hill and you know that this kid is going to struggle with standardized assessment and sitting at a table for a long time, maybe the team is going to ask you to help do some of the language testing ahead of time so that they don't have to spend quite as much time at Sunny Hill and this school. So maybe you're going to be requested to do some diagnostic testing. So in that case, you'd probably want to partner with your district SLP to help with the administration or with the interpretation. So the teachers should definitely be involved in the interpretation of the results, even if they're not administering the language assessment. And if the child has great language skills, is performing well academically, but falling apart in the afternoon or evening, they've had to drop out of figure skating lessons and they started wetting the bed, then probably your assessment's going to focus not on anything standardized. You're probably going to be focusing on like measures of fatigue, looking at classroom acoustics, maybe doing like a life questionnaire and doing an FLE and thinking about referrals to like deaf wellbeing program and that sort of thing. So depending on why you're doing the assessment, you're going to be taking a different focus, hopefully. And notice that a vocabulary assessment wasn't on any of those things that I was doing, because we don't do vocabulary assessments ever on a kid that's over the age of 5, unless they have really poor communication that's very super delayed. But we'll talk about that more next time. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen, there's a big chart on the Success for Kids with Hearing Loss website about the roles and responsibilities of teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing and SLPs, and I think they have audiologists and educational audiologists on there, maybe interpreters. So I just kind of pulled out the main ones for SLPs and teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. So you can see there's a lot of overlap in the areas that we can look at and support as professionals. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that making a language or a hearing diagnosis is a protected professional activity, and that's designated specifically to SLPs and audiologists. So you can, if you are doing a self, for example, what you can report on is say that the child has scores that are within the range of, say, a moderate delay or disorder. But you can't actually, as a teacher, give a language diagnosis. And I didn't realize that. I actually learned that from the college when I called them with my questions about this. So, yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. So which assessments do we use for a kid who uses a couple of languages, but not either super proficiently? We might use language sampling or checklists. For kids who speak English as their first language, there's tons of standardized tests and checklists you can use. For kids who sign only, that would be, you'd probably want to call Terry or Alana. And then for complex kids in the middle, or for English language learners, that's where the teamwork comes in, and you definitely want to be collaborating with your district team, like your teachers of the deaf, with your SLPs or your ELL teachers. You guys will already be bringing a wealth of knowledge into the assessment process because you're in the classroom and you're seeing the kid on a regular basis, so you have all that data already. we've already talked about this a little bit, but if the student's really far behind, the steps in progress of a standardized test will be too large to capture meaningful changes that have occurred for the kid. So for kids who are in the range of a severe language disorder, or 2 standard deviations below the mean, we tend to already know that they're delayed, and doing standardized testing doesn't really give us any new information. So what's more helpful is knowing the gains that they have made, because it gives us an idea of where their strengths are and we can build on them. And I know teachers of the deaf tend to be more strengths-based anyways. So I've got another poll coming up here, I think. Yes. So I want you, this is a dream list. Alana, are you saying something? Or did somebody just unmute by accident? Okay, I thought I heard something.
We're good.
You're good? You're great, Alana. Okay, so this is a dream list. So I want you to include all the things that you would think about while you're doing an assessment. So supports for the students or supports for you. So like an example would be like the room acoustics that you'd want to take into consideration. Maybe my question wasn't super clear. Are you guys allowed to post? Okay, you can't just post what I say. So maybe my question's crummy. What about, okay, there we go. They just took a minute to come up. We've got minimize visual distractions. Has the student had breakfast? Do I have all required supplies in adequate time? Use of FM, time of day, perfect. And you guys can actually like each other's little notes with the putting on the heart. Are there any others coming in? Any social issues? Have I practiced and reviewed the assessment? That's a good one.
I like all those polls.
That's fun.
Great. Great. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm just gonna quickly, yeah, when were they last assessed? That's a good point. So standardized assessments, usually you can't give them. So I think you guys have covered all of them. Maybe the only thing, what are my assessment questions? Does the assessment target what I'm looking for? Family issues or stress? The only thing I don't see in here is about team collaboration, so who you might reach out to. So this is a pie in the sky wish list. You talk about like referrals to like Sunny Hill, Depot. Thank you, Alana. Team collaboration. Yeah, you guys nailed it on the head. You got it. So you're thinking about everything, which is great. Yes, Alana?
I think your microphone's rubbing on your shirt, which is causing us to struggle with hearing sometimes.
It's not mine. I think someone else is unmuted because I heard someone stretching a minute ago.
I've muted everybody else.
Can you hear that? Yeah. I could hear scratching a minute ago.
I think it's you.
Okay. Oh, and Jamie added, can you hear me now? Yeah. Jamie added director knowledge that a TDHH can collaborate with SLPs because we had a conversation about this just the other day. Okay, so which domains do we assess? So a comprehensive assessment should include which of the following domains for our kids that we see? We had unlimited resources and unlimited materials. Yeah, auditory, access in the class, awesome. Any others? Yep, social emotional, awesome. Self-advocacy, academic, language development. On my list, I have listening at home. Nice one, cognitive abilities. Perfect. Okay. so you guys know what to include.
It's like the people watching today.
So regardless of domains that are assessed in the assessment and who does the work, you guys always bring the hearing piece to the table, and people want to know if the hearing difference is impacting classroom performance, academic achievement, or language, and you guys are the best people to collect the data and add that piece to the interpretation. So I know that like doing something like the child of the life doesn't really give us any new information. It tells us that distance and background make listening hard, which is not news, but it just gives us a nice, concise way to sort of demonstrate that and include the adults and students' life in the process so that they can start thinking about those things and how they're impacting the student in a different environment. It's also important to know if they're performing similarly across environments too. Yeah, Elena? Yeah.
Testing that my captioning is working. Okay, there's a question from the audience. What do you recommend with the type of data from home?
So we can talk about that next time, but sometimes doing even something simple like the child, which is just a questionnaire that you do that the parent does with the child to see how the child perceives their listening at home, and that the parent also fills out. Can be helpful just as a comparison to something like the life to see, you know, are they struggling in a similar way in distance and noise, depending on the environment. But we'll definitely spend more time on that one next time. So before I hand it over to Pam and to Joe, I just wanted to reiterate that we don't need to have standardized assessments in the file, but we do need to have a report in the file. The report should tell the student's stories. It should have background information, and then have more specific information like your observations, data that you've collected from your sessions, from your observations, and from any tools like checklists and assessments that you've done. It should also include areas of strength, areas of need, and then have recommendations around supports in the classroom and in the community. So here's another questionnaire I want you guys to quickly fill out. Again, just for my own knowledge, because there's a lot of, again, like folklore out there that people just will do a level B assessment and then throw the protocol on the file, and then they feel that that's adequate. Okay, so most of you are writing summary reports at least once a year, I would say. Awesome, that's good to see.
The assessment report, just if we did a...
And then there are a couple of honest people in the crowd, which is great.
And you do the self, that kind of thing. But then that's the IEP.
Okay, I think everyone's answered this one. Perfect. That's good information for us to know for when we're planning. So I'm just belaboring this whole assessment report business. So I'm going to, basically begin every assessment by asking good questions, pick the tools to answer those questions, build a team around the assessment, and always write a report. And I'm going to hand it over to Joe. So I'm going to mute myself. Is that okay?
Unmuted.
And will I be sharing Pam's and my screen?
I just made you presenter.
Okay.
So you can share it. And then on the Microsoft Translator, if you make yourself the presenter, then it'll just caption you automatically.
Okay, so Okay, so the translator is good. And are you seeing my screen now? Is the question. So if you're seeing a Word document, are you seeing a Word document? SLP?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's good there. Is the translator working? Because
Yes. I will interrupt you if it's not.
Oh, okay. And then here is our PowerPoint. Oh, shoot. I don't know how to go back and forth, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. That's what I love is the the informality of this all first. So I want to jump ahead to this first screen here because it's not our picture that's showing. So I'd like to introduce my colleague Pam Waterhouse, and I'll get her to just say a quick hello so you hear her voice.
Hi, it's Pam, and I'm a little bit froggy today. I don't know why. It must be the seasonal allergy thing. And I'm really honored and happy to have the opportunity to talk to you guys because teachers are my favorite people too. I have so much respect and regard for your job, and I could not do that job. So I really admire people that can. So yeah, thank you for inviting me today.
So I'm going to leave our PowerPoint for just a second because I thought I transferred this last night so that you guys would get a copy of this handout that you'll get after the presentation. So it's really small text there, but two things is I wish I'd done a Venn diagram like Tamara did. But you can see we've done a table here, which in our sense is our Venn diagram of just how our two jobs do come together and the such. So this is Pam had kind of worked up her working premise, and I looked at that. I thought, well, totally, that is exactly the same feeling that I have, and I've been fortunate to work with Pam now for a few years,
And that's probably why we've worked so well together as a team, is because we both have these same values around collaboration and providing the best service we can to students and recognizing the importance and the quality of service that you can provide to students when you do work as a team.
Yeah, and so I do. I think I'll go back to the PowerPoint because you'll get this again, and I think we'll interchange kind of as the conversation goes. And I think, what's our timeline again, ladies? Like we questions at like 12:45 at the latest, kind of thing. And I don't hear a response. Okay,
that would be good.
Yeah. Okay. So we may, who knows how long we'll be, but but you'll see that, again, how I do feel so fortunate to have been able to work with Pam. And so when Tamara and Alana first asked us to, if we'd be a chunk of this presentation, Pam and I sat down and we reflected on our years together and such. And I remember our first encounter with a young student. I was new to Abbotsford. I didn't really know the rules about, SLP's caseload, deaf and hard of hearing caseload. I was fairly new to itinerant, but not. I would only worked in the high school in Langley. And so that was kind of a little bit more in isolation there. So I arrived with this grade 3 student who had been a late cochlear implant at age 6. And so I sought out Pam, who I didn't really know at that point. And I was fortunate that some of your background, Pam, was such that she always was part of the team of the child with hearing loss. So she kind of ignored some of those fallacies too of, well, the SLP has their caseload, the TDHH has their caseload, and it just worked out wonderfly that, Pam then was able to do a bit of an assessment, didn't have a time, obviously, to work with this student at this point, because of course her caseload had grown. But to me, this set us off in this path of me being able to collaborate with Pam. She came in, showed myself and the interpreter some of the things that we could be doing. Luckily, we were in the school on the same day, so periodically we could touch base, and she would say, how's work going with RL? And then it just kind of went from there, and it just continued that way. So we came up with, as we reflected, just some of the ways that we wish to, because I know Jamie had put up the one in the little poll, you know, and making sure that our directors of instruction understand that we do need to team together. And that's still kind of a conversation we're still having, you know, that the directors need to know we're not, you know, have each separate caseloads. We need some of these together, and we need time. So that's what we wish we did more of, is really planned. Like we planned Pro D together, all the SLPs, and then the three of us TDHHs, we'd get together, but like once a year. And just the importance now of, we've got to make that a priority. Plan out that first Friday of the month, so it was planning that piece together, and you know, presenting workshops together. The SLPs put on a great day here in Abbotsford, and as I kind of was filming for them, I thought, oh my God, why weren't we doing this more together? You know, and it's just in moving forward that I wish to do that, you know, do that with an SLP, do these workshops together. And then speaking as a TDHH, knowing SLPs are busy, but you know, Pam would be the first one to say, yeah, let's sit down in September and see which one of the students that we really feel might need that self or that extra assessment piece. And just so they can, so it's not a surprise mid-year, and you know, you kind of plan for it. Because I know I had done it with another SLP, and it was so heartwarming as they came back to me mid-year and said, you know, I had written this student down, you talked about, where are we at with that? And I thought, oh, this is how it should be working, you know? Yeah. And then it was my bad for not getting back to her to kind of say, oh yeah, once we did the KT and the K-bit, it was deemed that we didn't need to do the self. So that was my bad. But I mean, it really showed that it can work if we sit down and kind of do that together. So I'm doing most of the talking now. Pam will get into it in just a second, because it's got so many excellent things. I get so inspired when I sit down with Pam, and that's why I always want to, I think it's so essential just to make the time, make the effort, you know, to kind of really do connect with your kind of your SLP. And so a little bit, not that we're off topic here, but again, Pam had gone to, you had watched another webinar that you had attended, and, you know, or just all of her vast background. And as we kind of got excited talking about all this, actually, I don't even see the time. We're at 12:15. So, oh, there's the clock, 12:15. Okay. So these next couple slides, you know, are on the handout. So I'll let Pam do a little bit of chatting here.
Okay, we kind of talked about, instead of just jumping into the formal assessment, there's steps you want to go through first. Both the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, the speech pathologist, in conjunction with the classroom teacher. And this is part of what Tamara was talking about with your formative assessment and your summative assessment, always having your IEP goals in mind. Making sure that they're being addressed in the classroom setting. If you're doing any pull-out to train skills, generalizing them back to the classroom as soon as possible, and then seeing how is that student using those skills in the classroom. Do they have access to the curriculum? What are the modifications or adaptations that student may need. But we're collaborating as a group right at this Tier 1 intervention stage, which is best practices in the classroom. The things that the speech pathologist is going to recommend, and that you, the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, are going to recommend: FM systems, visual supports, videos, role plays, books on tape. All of these things that you might talk about for your student are best practices for all the students in the class, and all of these things should be available to every student in the class that needs supports. And we often think about, well, if they're failing, we'll give them a support, and oh, look how good he's doing now, you know, while he has this support, so now we need to take it away. But in real life, we don't say, look how good the student is doing with his hearing aids, let's take it away. Or look how good you're doing with your glasses, now it's time to take it away. So our goal is really to make sure every student in every class has access to all the supports they need, to meet the outcomes of the curriculum. At the Tier 1 intervention level, the classroom teacher or the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing can access my services. And I don't speak on behalf of all speech pathologists because people do things a different way. But I'll often hear or get an email, hey, can you pop by on Wednesday and do a quick listen? And so for a quick listen, I do not require a referral. I'll just pop into the classroom and circulate amongst all the kids and chat a little bit. And usually I can chat with the student of concern for 1 or 2 minutes and say, oh yeah, it's just L and R and TH. And you know, when I corrected him, he could imitate the L sound. So let me pass you some pictures to work on. So there's things that I do offer at a very informal way with no formal referral, you know, or parent consent required. It's just that, yeah, a quick listen in the classroom.
And I know I've tapped into this with a newer SLP, so we've just kind of put it into this is what we do, and Lee bought in really quickly, and she did the quick listen. She's, you know, I've always said my one course in speech and language at UBC does not make me a speech pathologist. But I can certainly follow what the speech and language pathologist has recommended, and this has been ideal in many situations where Pam or Lee or Gail have kind of given us the articulation goals or supported us on what we think the goals are. And then it gets into our working practices, where then if we have an EA, knowing that, you know, if they're working with that student, you know, 5 to 10 minutes every day, then that student gets that practice 5 days a week, opposed to the 1 day a week we're in, or the, you know, the minimal time often than an SLP has for those students. So
yeah, and that's our priority for all of our kids. It's making sure they just have excellent things in place for them 5 days a week, not just the 40 minutes a week that we're in the building, or, you know, 20 minutes a week that we're with them. We want excellent things in place 5 days a week. So in my job as an SLP, I really put lots of time into this Tier 1 level of support, because you're really building skills in all of your peers, and the classroom teachers, the itinerant teachers. And I have so much to learn too. Every time I'm in a classroom, I feel so in awe of the person that chooses to teach as a career, because I could not do that. And just that they have all this wonderful knowledge and skills and things that I can learn, because I don't know, yeah, any of what they know. So it's always a two-way street.
mm-hmm. So then, as we, you know, I mean, everyone's used to the vocabulary of tier 1, tier 2, tier 2 then being, everything you do in tier 1 plus more.
Yeah, so now there's excellent things happening in the classroom, and we're taking our data on this child's IEP goals, and we're having that, how is he doing? Where is he breaking down? What can we do differently? And we realize he really does need some extra intervention in some areas. And maybe it's oral language, or maybe it's reading instruction, or maybe it's math instruction. So he's going to get all the wonderful things happening in the classroom, and he's going to get tier 2 as well. And so sometimes people kind of think, oh, when he's leaving the classroom with you, now I don't have to give him those tier 1 interventions, but that's not how it works. He's getting the tier 1 and the tier 2 as well.
And then that's where the collaboration, and we make sure we're, it really does set us up for some good co-teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and co-teaching is so important because that's where I learn skills, and that's where you can be modeling and teaching and collaborating with the classroom teacher and building their skills too. So it's a two-way street.
This was exciting to me as Pam and I talked more about that, and I'm consulting up in Powell River, and this excites me excites me, but also I hit myself that I didn't do this more as daily fives became quite popular in Abbotsford, and I never tapped into that, and I wish I would have, because what an excellent way to get into the classroom. When the kids are working independently, teachers they're kind of seeing what I'm doing, or seeing what the SLP is doing. So, for those that aren't in the elementary mode, that, there isn't this opportunity, but I think many of the schools are starting to go to this, the Daily Five or the cafe model. I've never heard of the Two Sisters, but I think that's out there too.
Yeah, and they really are two sisters, and our curriculum department just brought them in for a 2-day workshop in February. And so a lot of my classroom, elementary teachers specifically, are using this Daily Five model. And so my colleague and I do a workshop for teachers specific to students that are having difficulty with reading skills, and it's called Back Up and Work on Oral Language. So what we have done is taken their CAFE model and acronym and put all the different aspects of oral language, such as articulation, such as phonological awareness, such as morphological awareness, kind of in their little stations that kids rotate through. And so if you're interested in that handout, I have my colleague's permission to share it with you. And this is a wonderful way, if you want to get your toe in the door of the classroom and get into the classroom, it's skills that you're working on with your student that are just so classroom friendly. And when you're in the classroom, the student is working in a group, and that's our whole goal, is to have these kids connected to their class, connected to their teacher, feeling like part of the group. And when they're part of that group in the classroom, they're getting these wonderful models of the skills that you're trying to teach and reinforce from all their peers.
And I think, as Pam and I chat about it too, it's not that pullout is a bad thing. Sometimes we need to do that pullout.
Yeah.
But this is how I see now too, how we can transition it back into the classroom, transition the skills into the classroom.
Because we need to pull them out to teach them something, but so many kids don't generalize those skills into the environment they need them. And yeah, so if we can teach them in the classroom in the first place, we're really cutting down on our planning time, teaching time, therapy time, because we don't have to have special lessons for generalizing new skills. And at the same time, we're having the teachers see how we teach and how we reinforce and how we model and how we set up the peers to be a model, or prompt the student to take their turn, or prompt the student to use the skill that we're measuring. And so, yeah, you're just setting up this really positive environment that's really going to help the student make optimal progress.
And we don't have any polls. Sorry, I think next presentation we'll get some polls.
We'll get
going.
on it.
You know, and then so tier 3. This is, you know, and that's the nice thing is I think with Pam and our SLPs in Abbotsford is, you know, as much of the informal stuff we can do, great. You know, I think even social mapping one time, I just kind of threw it out there to Pam and kind of said, do you have any ideas around some of these social emotions? She's going, great, yeah, I'll come by your office. And we spent an afternoon on, you know, social mapping. And it was like, you know, it was a one-on-one workshop in its own.
Yeah.
But when it does need to get to that tier 3, you know, probably the same in many school districts, school-based team, or whatever you're calling, whatever it's called there, then, you know, into the referral.
Yeah, and so now we've been collaborating right since tier 1 interventions, and we're saying, oh, how's the progress? What can we do differently? Let's add tier 2. How's the progress? How's it looking? What can we do differently? Yeah, maybe the student does need a formal assessment. So that's the tier 3. And so that requires a referral. I always say assessment is not an intervention, because so often I will ask about, you know, what are the interventions? What are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, nothing, because he's on the list for an assessment. So being on the list for an assessment does not preclude intervention. And you guys know that because you have your IEP goals, and that's your intervention. So,
but it is a good kind of statement in the general kind of team meeting. Yeah. And I think here, oh yes, right. There we go. I thought I needed to click again. You know, like in Abbotsford, that's always been kind of the policy, and SLPs only to do the self. And of course, I was quite fine with that. I had done Tamara's kind of, you had done a self kind of training session. And at the end of it, I sat with Pam and said, okay, what was good for me is now I have the sense of what the self does, but I do not have the expertise or the confidence to do the best analogy, or, you know, to pull out
interpretation.
the interpretation, that's the word I was looking for. And here, and then the LSS teachers do the KT and the K-bit, but you know, and that's the big thing. It's they're all of our student, right? And we keep needing to kind of say that and educate them all.
Yeah. And I think the beauty of this is that Joe and Darlene, our teachers of the hearing impaired, came and met with the speech pathologists, and we had a discussion. We talked about it. We talked about the pros and cons, and we decided as a team, all of us together, that it made sense for the speech language pathologists to do the formal assessments of students. And the rationale is because the pathology part of our degree, that's the diagnostic part. We know how to interpret test results. Often it's not just the scores that give us the diagnostic information, but it's the way the student reacts during the assessment. You're looking at response latencies, you're looking for signs of anxiety, you're looking for use of imprecise vocabulary words. So then after I administer the self, I'm thinking, oh, I'm seeing a lot of imprecise vocabulary words here. I think I need to administer the test of word finding. And if the child has word finding difficulty, I can make really good recommendations specific to the student's needs. Or if I'm seeing a student that really isn't understanding the cause-effect piece, I'm thinking, well, I better do the test of problem solving. And now I can make some really good recommendations specific to the student's area of needs around understanding cause-effect, predicting, inferring. And these are skills that are just going to really impact the student's reading comprehension. So, you know, you can administer the self, but then what? You know, so for me, I use the self as my springboard as to what else do I need to look at? What other tests do I need to administer? Where am I going to go from here? And the whole goal of assessment is to have really good recommendations specific to that student and not generic recommendations like, yeah, he needs to work on grammar. Yeah, but maybe grammar is going to improve if you're working on narrative language skills, which are going to have a positive impact in so many other areas of social and the academic curriculum. So, yeah, I just think that when we work as a team, the positive outcomes, they're just so worth our time, and they make the time that I spend with a student and the time that you spend with a student so much more effective than when you're so busy seeing kids, you never take time to collaborate. On that very first page that we had showed you where we had our working premise, number 7 on that was in every communication interaction, there is a verbal message and a nonverbal message. Be aware of your nonverbal message. And when I slip into a classroom and take a student out to work with them, the nonverbal message to the teacher is, I got this. You don't really have a role in this. I'm the professional. I'm going to fix it on my own. But when you collaborate, when you say, hey, what are you working on? What can I do to support you? What can I do to support this student? You know, oh, I have some cool materials I can show you. Let me bring this in next week and show you how this works. The message is you're a competent professional. You have a role in the student's education. You play a critical role in the student's education because you're actually the classroom teacher that has them the majority of the day. And so why would I set myself up as the person with the magic wand that's going to take them out for 20 minutes once a week and fix them? So I guess because I'm kind of old, really old, I recognize that when I worked in isolation, my kids did not make the kind of progress that I wanted them to make, that I felt overwhelmed by the number of kids on my caseload. I have all these kids to see and I have no time to talk to teachers or parents. And then this profound revelation that, yeah, I'm kind of setting myself up for that in the model that I'm using, in my work. So I really had to go about changing it. And so I feel like when I use a collaborative model, I have wonderful relationships with Joe and other teachers I work with. So part of going to work every day is like having friends and colleagues, and it's your happy place. But the kids make so much more progress, and there's not that feeling of I'm working in isolation. I'm trying so hard, and I sit down to write report cards, and I'm so dismayed by the lack of progress that my kids have made when I'm working alone and nobody's good things aren't in place all the other hours of the day and days of the week that I'm not with them. So yeah, I really had to change my thinking around that. And I have nothing but positive things to say about working collaboratively with your fellow teachers.
Yeah, so and then it does, you know, that's what I'm finding too, is, and then we present that united front, and then with that classroom teacher, because I know that continues to be a challenge, is getting that teacher kind of on board and making the time.
And teachers are so overwhelmed by all these kids who used to be in separate classes being integrated and feeling overwhelmed with, you know, how do I help this student? And so when you go in and say, oh yeah, I know how, I'm here to work with you, we're a team, it's great, like this is, you know, this is so great, then they have that mental set of, wow, this is so great, look what you've taught me, look what you've shown me, look how good the child does when I can give him some of these supports that you have shown me or provided for me. And yeah, it isn't, we were talking about this yesterday, it isn't more work, it's different work, but it makes all the work you do so much more effective. And it also is, it's positive for you to have positive interactions with your colleagues and not feel like you carry the burden of your huge caseload on your shoulders, because that's how we all feel. If we can share it a little bit, you know, we're all working together with the same common goals, which is we want these kids to be happy, to love school, and to be successful in life. And those are our common goals.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we had prepared. I can see we're a little bit before time, but I guess then people actually might have a time for a little bit of a lunch. But so do we pass the mic back to you, Alana, or Tamara for questions? Comments? Is that how it works? Or
I have a question. Can you guys describe, sorry, I had to minimize some windows that I'd opened. Can you guys describe a time when you did a formal assessment together, and like what tools each of you used and how you wrote up the report, maybe?
The one most recent in my mind is one I did last year with Darlene, a different teacher of the hearing impaired. Yeah. Does one come to your mind?
No, yeah, let's do,
because I'm thinking
BL, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was, is that okay if I discuss one where I worked with a different teacher of the hearing impaired?
That's perfect.
Okay. Because it's kind of fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a lovely little guy who was maybe had the last formal language assessment, maybe kindergarten or grade 1, was now in grade 3, had many years of private speech therapy, as well as maybe attending some group speech therapy sessions at school. And I was new to this school. And so when kids are new to me, I kind of want to see them with my own eyeballs. I don't just want to read somebody else's report. And because it was done so long ago, I asked, hey, can I reassess this student? And so we prioritized him with all the other students in the school as to, you know, who's the highest priority and who's next and who's after that. So he came up for assessment maybe around Christmas time. And I feel like the teacher of the hearing impaired had done a lot of like parent checklists, how is he doing at home, and had done more of the communicating with the classroom teacher. That frame of reference, the learning assistance teacher would have done like an updated K-bit and her learning assessment, learning services assessments, the educational piece. And so then I administered the self. There were some social concerns with this little guy, so we did administer the test of social language. But what we found is the social things were mildly delayed and maybe attributed to the fact that in his home environment, he lived with a single mom, a grandma, and a grandpa, and there weren't other kids. So that child to adult ratio was really high at home. And they prompted him to do a lot of things. So, oh, say goodbye, say thank you, use your words. They were always prompting him. And so they didn't really understand how weak the social skills were in the school environment, where there wasn't those adults to be prompting him. There was a huge difference between the social skills at home and the social skills at school. So yeah, so we were all able to sit as a team then and say, well, what's our priority? You know, who's going to work on social skills? Well, they're best worked on in the classroom with the environment, in the environment he's going to need them. You know, let's have classroom lessons on these deficient social skills. Let's make posters and have prompts and maybe some signs that all the kids in the classroom will learn, and they will prompt each other when they interrupt. They will prompt each other when they would like to like enter a conversation or leave a conversation. And it was just that idea of you're finding what is the most important thing that this student needs, and how are we going to work on it in a really effective way as a group, as opposed to the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing would administer the self, and now it's her job to pull them out and fix all those areas that are weak. But you don't have that collaborative perspective where everybody has their input and everybody's working on common goals. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Joe and Pam about the logistics of working together?
The way people answered the polls at the first of the of your presentation, I kind of whispered to Pam, is that it seems to me almost that those of us that are here today aren't always the ones that need the encouragement of working with SLP. So I'm sure many of you are, but I know many of you aren't as fortunate to have a Pam as I have been. So I do want to thank Pam for the years that I've had with her, and to continue two together, because it is just, you get the different perspectives, don't you? And when they can come together, it's just phenomenal.
I have one more question. Did you guys have to advocate to your administrators to have the times that you could get together and plan, or that so that both of you could support the same student?
Well, we just took the time when we did.
Yeah,
we didn't ask questions, or Yeah.
I never ask. I just kind of say to the administrator, my own, and to school administrators, I kind of know how I want to do my job. So why don't you just let me do my job? And if you feel like there's aspects that aren't working well, let's chat about it. Let's address it. But I find in general that when I use this collaborative model, I'm spending more time in classrooms, more time with adults, more time with parents, more time with teachers, maybe less time at that tier 3 level of intervention where I'm pulling kids and spending time with them individually. But it's such a positive model that you can just see these kids making really good progress. And I feel personally, you know, when I reflect as a teacher, that I am seeing way more progress in kids using this model than when I would pull them myself once a week and work in a vacuum all alone. So I just get so much positive feedback from parents, from teachers, from administrators. It's really valued. And yeah.
We did, and one of the reasons we were asking Tamara and Alana if we could videotape this is because we've got a fairly new director of instruction, or the Abbotsford does, and such, but we really kind of felt you know, part of it is educating them too, as you know, because there is that piece to it too. It's not that they're always unwilling, but they need that education piece too, just how good it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Did we do what you wanted us to do, Alana? I think I stopped the share, right?
Yeah, can you turn your webcam on?
I did, didn't I? I can
can't
see
see
I
you.
can see us. Didn't you see me with my fingers going? Oh, there it went off again.
No.
There, no. Share my camera. Anyway, we can see ourselves.
Yeah.
We look great.
Well, one of us.
Oh,
does.
there it is. There it
Yeah,
is. I
they're
found
not
it.
too great.
Share my webcam.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Hello.
We were seeing, you didn't
Yeah.
see me making all these little funny faces, and but yeah.
I could hear it in your voice.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wish for you all that you have a Pam. That's my big point at the end.
So the
Thank you.
take-home message is just be mavericks, like Joan
Yeah,
Pam,
yeah,
and
just-
ask for forgiveness, not for permission.
Yeah.
Well, except for it works, and like it's such a positive way to work that you know what there's.
How can they say no?
Well, I kind of feel like administrators just see the benefits. Administrators see so much benefits to people collaborating when you can show how you've spent your time, how the kids are progressing. You know, look at the great progress we're making. You can't argue with that.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. Do you want to turn your webcam off? And we're gonna go back to my slides online.
Muted.
A couple more polls for everyone so that Alana and I can get prepared for next time. So for this one, you should be able to give 3 responses. So, and we'll focus in on the areas that have the most responses. So if you can, everybody see this?
Yeah.
Alana, can you see it?
Which sampling is hard.
No, I just re-added the link in case everybody else had closed their presentation. So if you could reopen it, I also have to do the same.
Owen gets a gold star, first answer. Oh, Rena's next.
I wouldn't mind seeing.
Which ones were you?
Oh, I wouldn't mind seeing your classroom observation or your teacher questionnaire at some point. If you
Life is
ever
up.
send it to me.
Yeah, that's easy to send.
I like
Okay, I'll give you guys a second just to finish
Just to make sure you're muted.
answering. Alana, maybe the best way to save this is like maximize your screen and then screenshot, and then we can, unless you can think of a better way.
Yeah, if you can make sure to share it though. Yeah. Share the results. Thank you.
Okay, I think almost everyone has given us answers. I'll give it one more minute. Alana, have you screenshotted it? Can I move on to the next one?
Nope, you haven't shared it yet. The results.
Oh, right.
Says,
and a couple more people have put their responses in too. So
interesting to all these different spots.
oh, here's one more. I'll give it another second because I think people are mulling it over, and I think there's a slight delay when they respond. All right, here we go.
I'm surprised.
Can you see it now, Alana?
yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Hold on.
Okay. All right, so the next one is, this one's more open-ended. So if there is any specific assessment tools or strategies that you want to learn about, if you can post those to the board.
It's such a good way to do a group.
You get all your
Webinar.
feedback as opposed to giving it to them at the end.
Yeah. So I believe it to be similar to seedings.
Yeah, but seedings is your telephone. So it makes sense that it, like you vote with your phone.
Oh, okay. I thought, yeah, maybe it was. I'm trying to think when Alana had, or Tamara had used it.
Joe, if you could mute yourself on Microsoft Translator, you're currently doubling the captioning because your mic is picking up Tamara's voice. So if you could mute yourself, or Tamara, if you could mute her, that would be great.
I just muted her.
Okay.
So those are just, are there more people that are meeting? Okay. I'll give it another minute. I see Raina's was very popular.
I mean, this is so great for the new TDHH.
If you guys have, I'm going to move on to the next thing in a minute, but if there's anything else that comes to mind at the last second that you'd like us to think about or discuss at the second installment of this webinar, you can just shoot us a quick email. I think it's kind of stalled out here. Okay, Jamie put in the chat box, Angela, Caitlin, and myself spent a collaborative Pro-D day to compile a list of assessments that compared and contrasted them all. We can share this with everyone. Okay, awesome. So Alana, we can share that out with everyone. I'm going to move on to the next poll. This will be our final poll, and then we should be done early if there are no questions. So in the crowd, there's probably a few experts. So if there's any tools that you feel really comfortable using or that you know a lot about, could you write that in there? And then that way the people taking the workshop know who they can reach out to the next time they want to try that tool out. Part of our goal is to start connecting teachers more with each other and building capacity in that way. So if you're really good at doing language sampling or doing the FLE, put that down here. Adele was asking, will we be emailed copies of the handouts? Yes, we will send those out in a couple of days. I just attended a workshop on explicit learning, and part of the strategy is spaced practice. So if we email them out tomorrow or the next day and you review them. Hopefully that will help you remember the content a bit better.
Oh, interesting.
That was what the instructor of that workshop did. Nobody knows about any assessment tools in the group? Thank you, Jamie.
I've seen one. I like the story grounded, but I haven't used it enough.
Are there any other general questions about today's session or things that you'd like to talk about next time? You can put them in the chat box and we can address those later.
And that's a piece of that story grounded too.
Or now. We have a few minutes now. All right, it looks like we're going to be done early. So just a reminder that Alana.
I just wanted to say, can you please take a screenshot of that last one because I can't see people's names that are associated with those comments.
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, hang on.
Yeah, there's some names there.
Oh, they're still coming. They're still rolling in. All right. Well, if you guys have any other questions or ideas that we can prepare for next week, let us know. And then if you are interested in participating in the initiative and collaborating with the College of Speech and Hearing Health Professionals to figure out the roles and responsibilities, particularly with regard to assessment, send Alana and I an email and we can put you in touch with the people that are overseeing all of this. So thanks to everyone for their participation and for attending and for being on time. No major technical glitches today. So hopefully next week goes as smoothly.
And special thanks to Joe and Pam for starting us off on the right foot.
Yes.
And sharing their examples of collaboration.
All right. Thanks, everyone.